Well, I want to welcome everybody today to the EntreprenHer Show. My name is Heidi Richards-Mooney. As always, I am your host. I am delighted once again to interview an amazing woman that I've known for several years, and now I get the opportunity and good fortune to share her with my peeps. So let me tell you a little bit about her. Her name is Mira Halpert. She is a mother of 4 children, 2 of whom learn differently. Mira is the founder of 3D Learner, a Boca Raton, Florida-based learning organization dedicated to helping students who learn differently to be outrageously successful. I think we all want to be that. Mira wrote, "Life is a Ball, Don't Put Me in a Box," and with her husband, Mark, wrote Success by 3rd Grade, and the recently published The 3D Learner, Transform Stress to Outrageous Success for your child, to help parents and teachers to be informed, empowered, and proactive. There we go. And understand that one or more of their children might learn differently. Mira, go ahead and hold that up one more time.
Here we go.
Actually, so there's the new book that's hot off the press. Am I correct in that?
Oh, it is hot off the press, and I'm so excited. You have no idea, first of all, the fact that, I've known you for a long time. I think you've known this page and other books.
It's a long time.
That's right. And the fact that it's a true tribute to our marriage of now 39 years that Mark and I got this together, and we're still together. So yes, I think Jimmy Carter once said that it was the hardest thing he did was writing a book with his wife. I think it's true, but only because we're so really passionate about helping kids, and it's sort of, no, this is the word or that's the word. So yes, well, it is. It's available.
We're going to talk a little bit about the book in a moment, but I want people to understand your background a little bit. Tell us how you first got interested in alternative learning and why it's so important to you.
Oh, why it's so important. Well, I think probably now what I've learned later is that I'm that kind of a learner, and I guess I didn't really understand that. But as you mentioned, yes, we're parents of 4 kids, and all of them, just like we're all different from our siblings, and we can't quite figure out how that happens. And I think parents are always a little surprised that their kids are so different. So when we had lived around the world, but when we came back to Florida, and my daughter was entering high school, we had this transition meeting. She had been a kid who had missed a lot of school for asthma, and I sort of think, she was sick, so I thought maybe it was because she'd missed all this. But when we were in this transition meeting, I brought Mark with me and said, I think I need Dad here, and that was sort of the beginning of what we've since learned 20-some years later. But and Julie was with us, and we went to the school meeting, and boy, were we surprised, because there were not just 2, but I think it seemed like there was a room full of people, about 10 people on the other side. And they started off this meeting, said, "Oh, we're so happy you're here. Your daughter is just a lovely girl. She's very sweet." And that's kind of this, but all right. But we just, as she's moving into high school, we just don't think she's college material. So wow. We suggest that maybe she go into a vocational track. Well, that's fine, but that just wasn't obviously part of our picture. And more importantly, it really wasn't part of our daughter's picture. So I turned, I think it was Mark that turned to Julie and said, "Julie, what is it that you want to be when you grow up?" And she, without missing a beat, she said, "I want to be the teacher I've never had." Wow. And that just was, that was sort of the beginning of how that started. And so, of course, the people on the other side of the table, I think it was an assistant principal, said, "Oh, well, honey," which of course was, even then was just a little demeaning, said, "You could be a teacher's aide." Well, that just, wow. Tears just flowed down my daughter's face, and she certainly knew what that meant. We agreed to disagree by the end of this meeting, and I said, well, if we take her out of support, educational support, she'd been a member of the National Junior Honor Society. So people, I think that, yes, did she learn different? I think the label at the time was a learning disability, but that's part of what happens with words and language. She had an IEP, which is an individual education plan. But they had never really had someone that had been in National Junior Honor Society. And quite honestly, that's sort of the misunderstanding about kids that learn differently or that have learning disabilities, is they are usually, that's the whole point. They're very smart. They just learn differently.
Yeah.
So then what happened was she was like, Mom, what am I ever going to do? And I said, just out of curiosity, the people across the table, if in fact we take her out of this program and put her in a vocational track, what does that mean for getting accommodations for college board testing? And of course they rolled their eyes at me and said, boy, Mrs. Halpert, now I get where your daughter isn't listening. She's not going to college. Like, I don't know where you get this through your thick head. And I think that's where this idea about sort of outrageous success became from. It's like, maybe part of it is that word outrage, but part of it was like thinking bigger than what we don't know what any possibility may be. So yes, I became a mom on a mission. And all of this, and really, thank goodness, Julie also became that part of a kid on a mission. And we changed her reading comprehension. And it sounds sort of strange to think, not just strange, but sort of not possible, that over the next few years when I developed and learned a lot of different things, went around the country training in different programs, and then really sort of that was how 3D Learner, our 3D Learner program was born. And her reading, I think by the time she entered her junior year, her reading level, her comprehension went up 4 levels in 7 months, which is, any educator will say, that's not possible. Well, it was possible. P.S. She went on to the University of Florida, got her master's degree, was a national board certified teacher, is now teaching highly gifted 5th graders in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And if I tell you, she is the teacher she never had. It is outrageous to watch her work with kids and parents. So since then, we've helped, I don't know, a few thousand kids from around the world who have come to, to our Florida facility. And we just decided that, there's so much talk now about what kids can't do that we decided that maybe it's time we share some of this with what parents are really the ones that make the difference.
So Mira, and I mean, having a couple of gifted children and one who had challenges learning as well,
right.
and teachers thought that she did have a high IQ. She rated very high, but she just didn't have, she kept telling me it was the teacher's fault, and I'm thinking,
you can't blame her. And honestly, it's so many ways. I mean,
yeah,
there's a lot of talk about teacher disability.
Yeah, in hindsight, it was the truth. She just
yes,
had the luck of the draw with some teachers that didn't, necessarily play to her learning style. Let's put it this way.
Well, it's
kind of, a lot of them don't, because they have so many kids to deal with, and they're trying, it's like the majority rules, I guess, if you will. But I imagine this is more the rule than the exception these days.
Yeah, and I think now more than ever. I mean, what's sort of interesting, right, is that sort of you and I grew up in an era where it was probably, our education system is really, first of all, it's not a whole lot different than it was 150 years ago. Okay, and that's sad. Okay, and when you think about here, we're having this communication over something that 30 years ago, heck, 10 years ago, we would have never ever believed that this was possible, right? So part of the situation is, yes, kids are different. Our system is not. There are certainly some teachers that do get it, but it really is at so many levels. A teaching disability at so many levels, meaning teachers aren't really trained about how to be able to work with kids that are different, but also kids are so very different than they were. Look what
we have to deal with now. The kids have so much more technology. There's more information they're required and expected to know. So let's talk a little bit about, what was the first step you took when you walked out of that room and you said to yourself, I just can't accept that my daughter couldn't learn and couldn't be a teacher. So what was
you mean besides crying for about an hour? Yeah.
When you were through and you came to your senses and you decided, you know what? I need to really think about this because I need to help my daughter. What was the first thing you did?
Well, so it's an interesting thing because we talk about this being sort of parents, but it certainly affects families and whatever. And at some level, it was even my mom as grandma, sort of one step back, was looking with and sort of came to me of all things and said, it sounds to me, I've heard different things, but it sounds like she's really a kid that learns differently. And I kind of was startled because here I have an education background and I, thought I was, that I knew things about it. But what I recognized is that I did some, when we talk about out of the box thinking, and of course, since then I have a whole different theory about that, but that's a whole nother story. I think I was really looking for different sorts of options. I had tried, when a lot of times, and it still happens today, we see this every day, that parents are told to go a certain way, right? You go to a psychologist and you get psychoeducational testing, and the psychoeducational testing leads you down a particular route. There's a lot of talk now more than ever about kids being dyslexic. That's possible, but there are lots of things that go into that. Had Julie been totally diagnosed as having dyslexia? Yes. Of having learning issues? Yes. Of having vision issues? Yes. I tried to find something that was really different because, quite honestly, we spent a lot of money. It wasn't like this was new to us, right? This is the first time we heard that she was having problems. And we had tried this decoding phonics-based reading for her. And I guess I came across some other kinds of programs and other kinds of ways that looked at the fact that she was much more of a visual kinesthetic learner, and she needed to look for things in patterns. So words, believe it or not, are made up of patterns. Letters are symbols. Symbols in certain patterns make words, make meaning. And so words create pictures. And the aha moment for me was, oh my goodness, that's the way I learn. Doesn't everybody learn like that? And that was sort of this, you can visualize lots of things. Right? You have to visualize what flowers look like and what if I change colors. And I always thought that people always thought I have a movie in my head. Doesn't everybody? Then I realized that my husband Mark does not have a movie in his head. And then I realized, wait a minute, how does that happen?
My movie's always playing.
Always playing. And it's sort of, I think I'm going to change the character a little bit. And when I tapped into that for Julie, it was an amazingly aha moment for her. We switched to having her listen to books and follow along. And she said, Mom, I don't really want, whereas please could I see the movie before I read the book, it was please could I not see the movie because it'll change the fact that I see Brad Pitt as the head, as the lead role in this. And oh man, they put the actor in someone else.
So she's the opposite of most people. Seeing the movie first would hinder her learning in the book.
Well, now she realizes that. She doesn't really want to watch movies in terms of because it messes with the picture in her head. Whereas before, all she ever wanted to do was to see the movie. And then, of course, she'd have the movie in her head and didn't really get the details of the book. So yeah, that's kind of fun.
Mira, considering that 20-some years ago, the internet was just in its infancy, and there was probably very little, if any, information for you, did you know who to call? Or, how did you, it had to be an amazing process. Not only monetarily with the travel, I'm sure, because I'm sure that being in Florida, we're not in the top 25 states of education to begin with. So I'm sure it's difficult.
That's exactly right. So I had heard about, and it was actually a radio interview about a gentleman named Ron Davis who wrote a book called The Gift of Dyslexia. And yes, so I flew to California. I was trained in that program. And then I realized, wait a minute, I need to go a little bit further than that. And I heard about this amazing assessment program that Mary Meeker had started that was, part of a worldwide, completely different sort of assessment at looking at kids and adults' abilities, how they learn visual and auditory things. So then I added that assessment piece, and I realized that kids had attention issues. And we looked at non-pharmaceutical ways to be able to deal with that. So we used the interactive metronome as part of, it's an integrated critical program. It's not as simple as, let's just do that, and that's what's going to fix it, so to speak. So yes, part of it was listening to other people that had tried things and had been frustrated, and I looked into it. It's a very good question. It seems like ages ago. It all sort of talk about a movie that all flows together. Yeah.
So what did you do? You created this system, obviously, based upon all the different components you've learned from here, and here, and from here, and then you created this amazing program that is not a cookie cutter, one size fits all.
No, it is not.
It's really very customized to the individual. Am I correct?
That's exactly right. And we actually work with the kids and the families. We sort of kid the kids about the fact that, mom and dad are going to have to learn about as much as you do.
Wow.
Because just as you notice, when you have different kids that learn differently, do we expect the kids to be able to be the ones that change, or do we as the parents have to be the ones that change? And I found for me, and from what I've been training thousands of parents and teachers now, is that they have to when your daughter was totally right when she said that about how she had to teach, and I found that I had to be the one that taught differently. So we train parents. We coach parents. Because these kids want to be coached on what to do. And so, yes, and everyone is different. Sometimes it's a week of learning about, of getting into learning about dinosaurs that kids like, or race cars, or ballerinas, or whatever, because you have to customize this to be able to make sure that you get into the kids' movie in their head, right?
Right. So then dyslexia, because you mentioned it earlier, is what I don't want to assume, but I will say, is it a big part of this whole picture in a lot of ways, or is that just one label that can be put on? And I hate the term label.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And that's part of the issue, is that it's one label. So when and as you know, there's a lot of controversy about dyslexia, because dyslexia really means a problem of difficulty with words. Plain and simple, okay? So the challenge becomes, and now what we know, which is when I went to grad school, we didn't know the difference between a left brain and a right brain, and now we sort of know that, and we know where, from functional MRIs, we know where language and words are. And it's sort of that integration of left and right brain. So a left brain learner is someone that is a sequential learner. It's by far, sort of how teachers teach and how our education system is met, right? Things go step 1, 2, 3, 4. They're very logical. They're very systematic. And we have since found, thanks to a lot of science and research that's been going on, that language and reading is sort of headquartered in the left part of the brain, right, sort of left of center. The right side of our brain is the creative, the warm, the sensitive, big picture. And so there are a lot of people that have this belief that if we're actually really just train that part, if we only just really zero in on and repetition and drill, and this can take years, by the way, to be able to they've been able to actually really make those changes. Well, some people think that's a wonderful thing. I'm here to tell you that I think what we need to be able to do is expand that and go towards kids' gifts and sort of where that right brain learner is, and teach to that, with the ideal that if you think the goal is up here about reading comprehension, well, then we all have the same goal. But getting there by shutting off the creativity piece just to be able to make the left side work, yeah, that's not something that I have found to be very successful, and also to be very worthwhile, because, man, we're losing a lot of creativity in a lot of these kids, and a lot of these adults. So yes, is dyslexia a part of that? Yes. But not completely. It doesn't tell the whole story. And also the other part of that is that when people zero in on just that label, they think, oh, then we just need to be able to do one thing. And what we've found more than anything, as you rightly said about our program, there are lots of components about this, right, not the least of which is the emotional piece.
So, and I think, and I know you're right, because we are, if you think about the holistic approach in everything we did, not just in our, if we thought about our holistic way of our health, and our holistic way of emotions, and our holistic way of learning, we would be more fully functional human beings. So,
we would. But that's hard. I mean, hard in the fact that people's mindset is such that they think that that's just so big. I don't know that I can handle that. And so it's a lot easier for them to be able to hear, oh, well, if they have this issue, then I can just tackle this piece and I can test for it and I can drill for it, and then I can test at the end. And let's be real about this. I mean, that if I gave me actually, or you, sort of a list of nonsense syllables and that's really what we're talking about, right? Is that if they think that kids that are dyslexic or that are having reading problems, a lot of times parents will come to us and say, oh, well, the teacher has said to us that my child has a fluency phase. And let me describe what fluency is being able to break up and sound out words in a fluent way. And the premise is if kids can read fluently, that then they can understand something. Well, it means that you can read fluently is what it means. I could read Hebrew fluently, but I'll be darned if I could tell you anything that it means. So
I can read Spanish. I don't know what it means.
And that's the thing, right? It's sort of
not like, comprehension. It has very little to do with comprehension. It's a good thing to know how to read fluently, but you need to understand what you're reading.
Well, and that would be the whole idea, right? And especially for us picture learners, that if I have to break up and slow it down, then all of a sudden the movie, it's like it's hit pause, and now I don't have a picture of what's going on, and now I'm completely stuck, and I don't want to go on, right? So part of the challenge is if I have a list of nonsense syllables, for instance, or nonsense words for kids to read, and you miss 18 out of 20 of them, I can drill you for the next 100 hours, test you again, and recognize, oh, look, you got them all right. But it's not necessarily that those are transferring for a lot of these kids, because their eyes may be doing something different, or their attention may be off, or they may have working memory issues, which a lot of times these kids have. But that's looking at the downside of what these kids have. What are they really good at is that they're wonderful at creating imagination. They're wonderful at remembering places that they were. I don't know if you had this experience with your own kids, but you know, my own son, who's now 28, can remember when he was 2 years old, and he goes, Mom, this is what we did in the house that we lived in when he was 2. And I'm like, are you serious? You forgot where your socks are? But you know, but they have that experiential memory that is just amazing. And that's what parents will report to us, is that how can they remember that, but they can't remember this word that they saw on a page and then transfer it over to here. And part of what I guess I'm getting at from our 3D learner process is that we're trying to get the kids to look at visual patterns. And as the visual pattern here, and by the way, that visual pattern has to have a meaning, right? It's not just cat. It's a cat, and what does cat mean? And you know, a cat to me is something that's completely different picture than your picture of cat, right? So that's what's
you want to test me? No.
No, I'm sorry. I keep using you.
Let's talk a little bit more about dyslexia, because I know that a lot of parents are concerned with that, and dyslexia is typically addressed with a phonics-based effort, but you have found that students can be far more effective with a hands-on approach. And it seems like we've been kind of talking a little bit about that already. So can you explain what you mean by that?
Well, so what I found with my definition, I'm going to say just dyslexia, but of kids that learn differently, is a little bit different. And I've actually used, we've come to use this graphic, if you can see it, this graphic a little bit differently. So, and now, by the way, they're round, and it's not an accident that they're round. You know, I think
they're balls.
They're balls. That's exactly right. And you know, my theory is that these kids are more like balls than kids. And I say kids because even adults that are balls are really more kid-like, right? Like they have to have fun, they have to have excitement, they have to sort of. But in any event, sort of, we talk about this and sort of where they intersect. That we have found, of the thousands of kids that we have worked with, is that a lot of these kids have, and I think I've mentioned it, is that they have an attention issue. Well, is it an attention issue, or is it because they're not engaged? I don't know, but the outside affect is the same, right? Sort of moving around, okay? Then they're called right brain learners, or they learn differently. These are kids that think in pictures, but we don't ever really we don't really ever ask kids that. And the fascinating thing about that is, in specs, I'm going to have a young lady that's going to walk in a minute. They don't actually know that they're thinking any differently or thinking in pictures, because that's the way they think. So we're trying to be able to teach them to access that. And that's part of the training. So even though it might sound like something that oh, gee, they know it, they don't always. And then the other part about that is that you're usually, believe it or not, here they're very visual, but a lot of times they have visual skills. Okay, look, I have the vision problem. My eyes aren't looking at the same way at the same time. And you know, that can play havoc with my brain. Luckily for me, I'm old enough that my brain's gotten used to it. But there are also some other processing skills so that are going on. So it makes a difference about being able to assess and access and work with all of those, because the piece that's not here, but is the white all the way around, is the fact that there's an emotion piece. There's an emotional piece to that. And these are kids that want to please, and these are kids that want to succeed. It's not that they've decided that I don't want to do this today. So when that emotional piece kicks on, something shuts down and those balls become deflated at some level. Correct?
Let's talk a little bit more about the emotional component. I know you've discussed this about the heart, mind, and soul of the parents and 3D learners. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, so these kids, as I sort of mentioned, leading just aside to the fact that I was emotional at this fateful first meeting, these kids are usually very, and I'm sorry I'm using the word kids, but we'll sort of know that we're having the universal word kid, right? I'm just going to use pencil for a minute. When they're thinking in big picture and they're so very emotional about something, if something doesn't match their picture, they don't want to do something, right? And part of what happens is that they become very disconnected. Let me go back to sort of so that's the emotional piece, and that's kind of disconnected. But we also have found that the body part of this is that a lot of times they don't know where they are in space, and they actually have a difficult time physically crossing this imaginary midline. Remember I said to you that we have right brain and left brain? Well, so the right side of your body controls the left side of your left side of your right, so I'll get this right. Right side of your brain controls the left side of your body. I got it. The left side of your brain controls the right side of your body. So when you're even doing something like this, you're actually having to be able to activate both sides. Tough afternoon. So we actually do exercises with kids. So we get the body going, and then we try to be able to get the mindset about what is possible. So when we use this word outrageous success, yeah, that's kind of a mindset, right? About, I just want to be sort of good. I want to be able to think about what might be possible. Okay, we have to obviously be fairly realistic here, but on the other side, just thinking that you're only going to move up one grade level in a grade is not so outrageously successful. We were just at a school meeting just this last week, and teachers thought, well, the goal should be here. Well, their mindset changes when you think the goal should be here, right? I mean, and if that's our goal, then what do we have to, I guess I got to do something different to be able to get here. And without that goal being higher, then you don't change your mindset about how you're going to get there.
Right. I can see that. I can see they would just kind of go with the status quo, knowing that they're going to eventually get to that point, because they will get there, but it'll take them a lot longer.
They will get there. And they will get there. And honestly, this is sort of where we wrote this book for parents to recognize that they're the ones that actually make the difference. Okay, I mean, and they won't make the the parents are the ones that have to be the ones that start. I mean, just as we did, nothing was going to happen if Mark and I hadn't helped make the decision that things were going to change, right? And that we changed our goal to be able to, that if we changed our goal about what it was that was possible and what we had to be able to do to make things happen, right? Because left itself, the schools weren't going to make any difference. They weren't going to change it.
Right. And,
right?
and have you still found that to be the case? A lot of the schools, do you have a lot of resistance still, or people are they starting to come around and realize that there could be one way to teach?
Oh, I wish.
Or is that another whole story?
That's a whole nother story. And I mean, at some level, I mean, being able to have you, have Mark have an opinion about that, because he's actually worked at a state and national level. Because it is it's a very difficult piece to be able to try and get, and you stated earlier, it's not easy. It's not that I get this all the time. It's certainly, I'm not the classroom teacher, and I get that I can't do this. They have a difficult task, and they, and it's not entirely their fault, but we actually, as parents and voters and whatever, have to be able to look about how we have to be able to change that. Because I will tell you that it's a great honor that I have to be able to work with kids and their parents like this, because these are the kids that are going to make the difference, right? These are our future Einsteins and Edisons and Steve Jobs and Richard Bransons and Whoopi Goldberg, you name it. I mean, and the interesting piece is, especially for girls, the girls are sort of wanting to be able to be more compliant. So the idea that they can think differently and do things differently, build things, that's not sort of, even today, it's better than it was, but it's not anywhere where it needs to be. Right. And I think that teachers, it's interesting, because teachers are trained that kids learn differently, but they're never ever given any sort of, oh, by the way, this is what you do to be able to help them. And workshops that we have run, teachers have been amazed at simple things that you can actually do about changing how kids can actually be successful. Not the least of which is changing their mindset.
Right.
About what's possible.
Sure, that's the first thing you have to work on, so that you have to have buy-in before they're going to be able to do it effectively, wouldn't you think?
Absolutely. You have to have buy-in. And letting kids know that they have buy-in, and getting kids know that, gee, maybe the way they looked about this, tell me a little more about how you came up with that answer. And they'll tell you.
So Mark mentioned when we talked about that they will eventually get there. Mark wrote, no, they often do not get there. So I just wanted to make that clear, that he's, and I'm sure you would agree that there are some that never get there, and that's because of all the challenges with the process or the system or the parents or the teachers. It's not that we want to place blame, because that never solves anything. And what I love that you and Mark are doing is not placing blame. You are trying to find ways to change things. And I think that that's, you're empowering the students, the parents, and eventually the teachers will get it, and hopefully they'll get empowered, and this whole movement will become humongous, because there are not just a handful of kids anymore that learn like that. I would guess, because I have 3 daughters,
right,
that probably 2/3 of the population learns.
Well, that's about right. Actually, it's over 60%.
And my brother and I both were different. I was I think I've been tested, and I'm very bi-hemisphere, but I tend to be more right-brained in many ways. But my brother was totally right-brained, and that poor kid didn't have much of a chance in school. He wanted to be a veterinarian, but and then we didn't have any chance of knowing. We didn't know you and Mark, first of all, and you were too young.
Thanks, I'm old, but not that, right?
Going on. He didn't have dyslexia, but he had a problem with attention and comprehension.
Well, and the interesting piece about that, and and what's fascinating when you talk about, and it just sort of hits me that, you wanted to be a vet because, these are all these nonverbal skills, right? These are these nonverbal about that, and the questions we ask parents and kids. But again, sort of, do you remember places that you from a long time ago? Are you good with younger kids? Are you good with senior citizens? And are you good with animals? That's kind of an odd kind of a group. And everybody will go, oh, that's exactly my kid. How do you know that? Well, because they can relate to them on an emotional level, right? And they aren't necessarily listening to the words they're using. They're relating to them. They make a connection. And that's the biggest thing. don't let my secret out. My biggest thing is being able to try and make a connection with these kids about letting them know that the way they think is amazing. But I think that we have so many ways to be able to hold kids back that, well, I can't let you go on to this page because you didn't master this one 100% where you read every word out loud fluently and pronouncing it correctly. So until you master that, we're not letting you go on. And,
it's like testing children.
Oh,
to me, I mean, you think I have one of the most brilliant people who works for me part-time, and I'll tell you what, she wanted to work in the school system and failed the test 3 times. And I want you to know, this is a brilliant woman. She can take a job that you give her, tear it apart, figure it out, and do it. And yet the school system, because she couldn't pass their tests by some silly little margins, and she was doing the work, but they let her have the job and said, look, you've got out of probation period, but after this time, you have so much time, I think it was a year, to take this test.
Yeah. That's, again,
I took it out and she
thing,
lost all confidence. And that's
and look at, exactly. So look at that whole emotional piece, right? And it's like, and the whole self-talk about what she could or couldn't do, but that's a whole nother show idea about testing.
I know, but I'm just saying, I think it's important to know all the different ways that this impacts not only our children, but our society.
Well, and that's probably the biggest thing, is sort of where it impacts us in terms of, well, certainly entrepreneurs and coming up with new ideas, and where it comes, it's a fascinating thing that, I'd like to say before our time, but when President Kennedy had this idea about going to the moon, and I remember the adults around me thinking, that is just the craziest idea ever. How could we ever think about it? Talk about an outrageous goal. And yet it happened, and then some, and now they're talking about the fact that our grandkids are going to be going to visit the Mars. I mean,
yeah,
it's kind of a long vacation, but but somebody has to have that vision, right? And I know that somewhere we've sort of gotten stuck in this model, and even medicine has gotten it, and education has gotten stuck in this model of having to be able to prove everything. Well, last I checked, every human being is different. So why would we want to be able to have them tested all the same way? And that's a big problem. I mean, that is a big problem. And so trying to be able to work toward the kids' strength. Look, you go where they're at, whenever you get that. I mean, you talked about, and I'm not sure if it's guilt or if you're feeling, but our daughter was going into high school. We worked with her. When we worked with her, is it easier to be able to work with kids when they're younger? Sure, but you work with them when you work with them. And they're the other really cool thing that I've found with all of this stuff about brain plasticity is, you can learn new things all the time.
Oh yeah,
all the time.
Can. I agree. I learn something new every single day, and I think that's probably my saving grace. It's what excites me. I couldn't even imagine a day going by without learning something.
Well, can you imagine these poor kids that sort of sit there that don't, and so they'll figure out something new to learn by doing something else, that the teacher might not like, whether it's throwing something across the room or tripping somebody, or they need some sort of active learning. And it's sort of interesting because you talk about testing. I have a friend who runs a school who didn't really know the assessors of the school didn't know how to be able to assess the school because they didn't have real tests to do it, that the kids were actually doing experiments and showing how physics worked. And, we have to get over ourselves a little bit about the fact that we actually test kids all in the same way, and everybody has to be able to.
Well, like Lane said, standardized testing is horrible, but the bigger issue is that teachers who teach students also grade them. I agree. It allows for too much bias. Teachers should be empowered with tech to grade students in other classes. Wow. Lane, kudos to you. You're probably right, because then there's no judgment, or very little judgment, or less judgment. I don't know.
We could have just schools for, have kids develop things, right? And they're all new businesses and all. I mean, that's the thing, is sort of these budding entrepreneurs, and like they make up things. These kids have a better perspective about how to be able to do stuff than just being able to answer a test the way somebody that wrote it wants to answer.
And I want to get back, I want to just mention my brother again, then I want to talk a little bit about, I want you to talk about some of your successes. My brother, although he did not become a veterinarian, he works in the sheet metal industry. He did become an inventor. So he was able to use some of the gifts that he had to create something that people needed. And he hunts with a bow and arrow, and he created these things that go into the tree trunks. They're called, oh gosh, not steps, but he's got clients, he's got customers all over the world. So my mother was an inventor. I've invented a couple things, nothing that's been monetarily successful. But my brother is my hero, because he created something, is making money at it, and he's going to have residual income the rest of his life. Finally retires.
Yeah, that's the deal, right? Is being able to do a
that was the upside to that. But it took a long time, because he suffered quite a bit in his 20s, 30s, and even 40s, until I think it was not until his later 40s that this happened to him. So it was, something that I'm sure that if they don't get the right training, teaching, and everything that goes along with that early on, it can impact them the rest of their lives emotionally too.
Well, that's the key. I guess that's what I was going to say. Look at how long it took for your brother to be able to get over what was happening to him in school. And I think that's probably what hurts me on a daily basis, is to see kids that are so beaten down by going to school. I mean, here we are about to have summer vacation, and kids are excited, and I think parents of kids who are struggling are just as happy anyway. But
they feel like they're get a break, but they're not.
Yeah, no. And that's probably why, for us having a summertime, I don't want to make it like school, but we need to make we need to make it learning fun. I came up with this coin phrase called flirning, right? Which is fun learning. And you should see kids when I say, "Oh, we're flirting." And they're like, "What?" They go, "Fun learning." And they go, "Well, they don't know what the word oxymoron means, but they sure do learn that fast." Because
I love it. Let's talk about your successes, because I know you've had lots of successes in your
yes.
on your journey. Yes. So can you share a few with us?
So we've had our biggest, two of our latest successes are two young men that we worked with in 4th grade. They were told by a professional that, don't ever probably go to a special school, because, you're actually dyslexia, your learning issues are such, and your attention issues are such, and don't ever go to this prestigious private school. Well, yes, just this week they've been honored by the fact that they're graduating tops from their class and at this private school. And yeah, one's headed to that small school nobody knows about called Harvard, and the other MIT. So that's pretty cool. And we had a young man who years ago we worked with him in 2nd, 3rd grade, and he just passed the bar this year, and it credits the fact that knowing that I learned differently, and recognizing that I had to do things in a different way, and knowing I had tried all those other kinds of, when you talk about phonics programs, I had tried all of those, but I passed the bar, and I'll never forget the fact that I actually did this thanks to you, Mira. Well, makes me really happy. But we've had lots of kids that parents will say, I had their college savings fund, but I wasn't ever gonna be able to use it, and now they're actually able to go to college when we never thought that they could. So, there are lots of, but I have to tell you that, when they talk about it, village, it's taking a certain amount of commitment. It's not just we're the jump start at the beginning of a process. So when I say to you that we coach parents on how they can best be their kids' coach and advocate, we're trying to be able to get the kids to start to be able to be their advocate. And that always sounds, oh, gee, they just have to speak up for themselves. And for that, these kids, that's a really hard thing to do, right? So, right. And it changes. So yes, we've worked with a lot of these kids. We've worked with kids that have become athletes. I have a couple of young men that are in New Jersey that are doing crazy rodeo horses, and they're doing some amazing kinds of things, and some people that are doing really creative, artistic kinds of things as well.
So who do you work with, Mira?
So we work with the entire gamut, because we work certainly with kids that are identified, that are gifted. Some of them are some of them are just below, if you want to, sort of that cutoff. And everybody thinks that gifted kids, oh, well, they just have it made. Well, remember, it's a curve, right? So they're just as far away from whatever we call normal. So there are lots of times those gifted kids have uneven. And actually, really, sort of one of the bigger definitions of giftedness is asynchronity. I will almost say it right. I'm smart. Part of that issue is, so we work with those kids. We work with smart kids that are struggling. Sometimes they just don't get it. We work with, those kids that are specifically identified as dyslexic, or have learning differences. Most of those kids, if they're struggling in school, are kids that are not learning, as the way we've said before, not learning the way that everybody else thinks they should. When we talk about hands-on, I work in clay. When you talk about a product you developed, and I've patented, I have patented colored rods that we make letters to a specific size to be able to actually really form letters. So they do that. We also actually work with kids that are at the low end of the IQ spectrum, as you will. We've seen lots of growth where lots of people have said, oh, well, no, they won't ever read. So we really work with a lot of those. There's a program called the Gardner Scholarship that's here in Florida, for your listeners that are here in Florida, that actually really supports a lot of these kids that have been identified as other sort of medical issues. And we found that we're a program that supports that, takes that financial support. And we've been able to be successful for them. So,
So cool. So you're impacting a lot of lives, obviously.
Well, we're doing our best. And that's actually, when you talk about a vision of mine, my vision really, I talk about an outrageous vision. I really have this, I feel like kids, I think, are put down at lots of different levels. And I think the idea about the ability that these kids have so much more that they can do, and that, that we can have an impact on lots of them. And it's sort of interesting because, we've had kids from around the world. We've had kids from around the world that have come to us. And I'd love to be able to try and branch out and be able to do that. And so we're with our book, by the way, that's available for free. I have to tell you.
Yes, hold on a minute. I'm just going to turn that off. I'm sorry about
that. Our book, and I so appreciate our book. We're having this big launch. Remember, I told you it's taken us all the years to get it up. So it's available from our website, 3dlearner.com. We'll give you, we have a special guide to be able to help parents get through this, and it takes them to Amazon. And for this week, it's a download on their Kindle for free. And, we encourage any parent, any grandparent, any teacher to be able to download it. We'd love to hear your feedback. Good and bad, I guess I can take it, about how, they can help someone. We used to have this joke that when we first sort of started this, that Mark would go off somewhere and, he's Mr. Networker, and that he wasn't coming back. And my kids were like, oh, Dad must have met another 3D learner. And that's really why we call the kids 3D learners, because they think differently. They think in 3 dimensions. And, hear you saying how your family's full of them. My family's full of them. I think my grandfather certainly was one who would stand on rooftops and be able to hammer with both sides, and was a beautiful cabinet maker. So I guess I sort of come by that honestly. My father was a musician, certainly very whole brain. He was a mathematician on one and a musician on another. I think we all have families that are full of kids who learn differently and need to be celebrated for their differences. Oh, boy, do they need to be celebrated.
I don't want to quit. I don't want to close without talking about the book a little bit more, because we've only really touched the surface of it. And I think that that's going to be the next step for a lot of people. So I know that Mark is sitting next to you now. If he could get
I think he just moved back, but it's right. He's around.
Good.
He's around.
Mark, if you'd like to if you'd like to call in, I'd love to have you in this part of the discussion, because since you two wrote it together. There we go. Excellent.
So, can you hear him?
Here he comes. Well, it's going to take a second.
It's going to take a minute. So we wrote this sort of idea about sort of stress to success, and we've used the acronym SUCCESS. Okay, so it's a 7-step process. SUCCESS. There we go, 7. And I'll have Mark talk a little bit about it. You know, this is this idea about this right brain, left brain kind of person, about being able to put this book together, but being able to try and access parents who learn differently, both right side of the brain and left, to be able to try and get them to understand how their kids might learn.
Okay, so Mark, I don't see you, but I see your picture. So welcome, Mark.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Oh, we're so delighted. You know, you two are two of my favorite people. I've known you for a long time. In fact, Mark and I, for those listening in, were in a mastermind many years ago, and that was a lot of fun. I learned a lot from the 3 guys and me that were in the group.
That'd be true.
I really enjoyed it and missed those days. And Mark, tell us a little bit about your participation in the book, because I want to spend the rest of the time talking about the book, and anything else you'd like to share about the book.
Sure. Okay. The book is simply the hardest thing we've ever done. Okay. And
do you think raising 4
I
kids
recommend that anybody wants to go to an insane asylum, write a book with your spouse. And
no, we're honest.
But if you took a look at it, Mira and I are really an interesting contrast, because Mira is clearly a right brain learner, creative, visual. I'm a left brain, logical, sequential kind of guy. But we both share one thing, which is a passion for kids' success. And the whole concept of success, an outrageous success, came to us when we realized that when you set goals, you make some progress, but when you set a bold goal, and when you have a mindset that I'm going to get my kid from 3 years below grade level to grade level, all of a sudden, you have to put a lot more things in motion. And so we started with the first concept that success is the only option. That's the first chapter. And the second chapter, which is really important, is assessing for success. Because if you're assessing for success, you have to look at the whole child. If I'm going to try to improve a kid's phonics-based skills, all I have to look is the phonics-based skills, train it, and God bless America, I've made them more fluent. But if you want to get a kid much more successful in reading and in life, you have to look at the whole kid. Look at do they learn differently? Do they have an attention issue? Do they have a vision issue? And then you go through things like setting bold goals. I'm a crazy goal setter. I know this. When we set goals with our parents, they look at me at first like, can that really be done? And I said, not with what we know now, but we'll get there. And sure enough, we do. And then we talk about collaboration, because there are a lot of advocates who go to schools and they're adversarial. We're collaborative. We believe that it's about being a whole team. And then lots of times the 5th chapter is execution. How do you execute this? This is hard. This is really hard work. You're going to hit people that tell you you're out of your ever-loving mind. You're going to hear people tell you you're not being realistic. I always like those people, because I'm going to prove them wrong. Okay, and then you just hit hard spots, but you fight through it. And then it's getting through it with your spouse and getting through it with your child. But if you go back for a second at what my role, I think my role was that of being the dad. And what Mira hates about school meetings the most is when she's just in a meeting, as talented as she is, as much as she knows, it doesn't have the same effect as when a dad's in the room. And I had that happen again this morning with a great dad who when he was in the meeting, when dads say things, people listen. And the other thing about dad's role is we're often on different pages. I think Mira at one point was on the 12th or 14th floor, and I was still on the first floor getting in. And it really helps. One of the things we recommend people when they read the book is both read it so that both parents are on the same page. And the other thing to recognize about what we do is our commitment is actually to help every parent understand their child better, understand what's right about them, where their challenges are, and how to get there. And so what we do with the book is give them an action guide, but also give them a no-cost assessment and consult so the parents can actually know not only about this genre of kids, but know what specifically, how it relates to their kid.
Excellent. So, Mark, how long did it take you to write that book?
I refuse to answer on the grounds that it may.
Okay. Well,
actually, I'll be very if I could say something for a moment.
Yeah. Go ahead.
On the 9th rewrite, we decided that we were going to start with a blank sheet of paper, take a room at the Embassy Suites, and write for a weekend. And that's actually how the final version got written.
Finally got together. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, but you set a goal and you did it.
That's right.
And it's fine. I know, because as an author, I will start writing a book, or I'll start doing a writing project. Then I'll put it aside because, life takes over. And I have a book that I've been writing for about 9 years. And
well, then that's about right.
We can relate to that.
The book is how to write a book in 9 months or less.
Actually, we wrote one.
We actually wrote our second and third book first.
Okay, our book Success by Third Grade was actually written in a weekend.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Right.
But you know what? It was so many, I'm sure, when you think about the 7-step process and how much detail is involved, and how do you translate that you're going to touch on both.
Well, and which story and which kids do we talk about?
Exactly. And those are things. And I just wanted to really quick welcome a few people who joined us recently. Anna. Welcome, Anna. Welcome, Bart. Jonas, thank you for the comment. If we don't have to stretch, we would have already been there. Love that. And welcome, Obama Damas. I hope I said that correctly. So it's really exciting when people get to join you and listen in, because this is just such important information. And I know you talked a lot about kids, but I think that adults could relate to it too. We're still learning. There's a lot, I'm sure. Would you say, do you work with adults?
Actually, I do work with adults, and I want to say a couple things about that. I mean, I personally, what I found that there are not very many people in this country, actually in this world, I guess, that work with adults. I do. I take them on, and it's wonderful. I've worked with young doctors. I worked with a young engineer who had to have a job change. And it's fascinating because, by that point, of course, it's also an emotional journey. I worked with a gentleman who was a retired successful entrepreneur. He thought he was stupid because he couldn't really read. And when he realized all the things that he could do, and in fact, what he was doing was reading, but again, not reading the way someone else, sort of like this, like the way he thought someone thought he should read. So yes, we do work with adults, and we work with adults using our attention device. We help their tennis game, we help their golf game, and oh, by the way, their reading and processing and thinking skills and goal setting, come about.
That's wonderful.
So
we're going to close with two things. Of course, I want everybody to know how to get a hold of you in a moment. But before we do, Mira, I'm going to ask you this, and I'll also ask Mark, if you're still there, Mark. What's the one advice, or what's the one thing you'd like to leave the audience with that perhaps we haven't talked about yet?
I think probably this is sort of not only the educator professional, but also the mom, sort of now mom, grandma here, knowing that parents are not alone and that we've been there. We have totally been there. So it's not sort of like going off to a professional and they have their, whatever their degrees they are, and they're testing that they have seen this before. We've not only seen it, we've felt it. We've been there. We know the angst. We know the sleepless nights. We know the tears. We know the tantrums. We've been there, and we've and I'm not going to tell you that it's all wonderful and roses. I mean, it takes time, but I think more than anything to know that they're not alone, and you start when you start.
Like you said, and knowing that there is help, because I think that the biggest frustration people may have is not knowing where to go, or not knowing who knows and who's going to be able to help. They probably tried a lot of different things and they haven't worked.
And I have to tell you, Mark's the one who's more on the phone than I am, but or on the internet, that we are happy to talk to parents anywhere to be able to try and help them through this, because it's really hard. It's really frustrating. Like, do I just listen to this person or do I listen to that? And trying to be able to have us help guide them. We're happy.
Well, thank you. And Mark, what would you like to share?
There's probably few things in life that are more satisfying than help a smart, struggling child become outrageously successful. And if we can have one impact in this world, it's helping thousands, if not tens of thousands, not millions of kids or parents realize that schools don't think this way, but your kid does. And you can make the difference by having that mindset that says, I'm going to make the difference, assessing for success rather than for disability, and then partnering with the right people, whoever that might be, that share that passion and can make it happen.
Beautiful. Well said, both of you. It's just a thrill to finally get this opportunity to learn more about you, what you do. And I thought I knew, but I obviously didn't. So, Mira, how can people get a hold of you? And I'd like if either one of you have the link to the book, or if you just want to type in the title in the chat, the full title, so that people know how to get it.
Oh, I guess he'll do the typing and I'll do the talking. How's that? So if they go to our website, which is www, so they can get this out, 3D Learner, really easy, the number 3, the letter D, learner.com. And on our front page, there is just a quick form that if they just give us their name and email, they can have access to the download to the book. But what we're going to offer them is a guide. If we get all of the computer pieces right, they will get a guide, a free guide, to be able to help them read the book and give them a few tips to be able to help them right off the bat even before they read it. And that's the best way. And they can browse around our website and call us. Certainly, if you have a burning issue, and we all know at the end of the school year that there are lots of now all of a sudden burning issues, please don't hesitate to shoot us an email at parents@3dlearner.com or call us.
Excellent.
Happy to try and do that.
What's that phone number? And also
561.
The phone number to call, and also share your Facebook. I know Mark wrote it in there, but I'd like it for the recording.
Okay, well, so our phone number is 561-361-7495. And our Facebook is the www.facebook.com/3dlearner. We also have a free success assessment. Look it over, take it with your child, because you'd be amazed at how many parents will go, oh, I filled this out, and then I asked my kid, and they're like, wow, no, it was completely different. So there's a free assessment. It helps us have the first conversation with you, and no obligation, but it sometimes is really eye-opening for parents to recognize that, oh, I didn't know that. Just like I didn't know my daughter thought in pictures. Who knew? Who knew?
Who knew, right? Wow. I'm so sorry we're out of time. We could do another hour, I'm sure. And we will plan another time and maybe focusing on one specific issue. But I want to say again, thank you, Mira Halpert, MED, educator extraordinaire, and the partner of 3D Learner, along with her husband, Mark Halpert. Thank you so much for being with us today. Hold up that book again, The 3D Learner.
It's Transforming Stress to Outrageous
Transforming, what's the subtitle? Excellent. So thank you again, folks, for being with us. And thank you to our guests who our audience who listened in. Again, this is Heidi from Women in E-Commerce, the host of this show. And the EntreprenHer Show. If you know of an amazing woman that you think should be on this show, let us know. You can contact me at Heidi@wecai.org.
Thanks a lot.
WECAI.org. Mira, Mark, thank you again, and have a great day, folks. Bye-bye.